All right, so we're going to study, head our way into the fruit of the Spirit and the unity of the Spirit. So I'm going to put those together. And if you have a bulletin, if you didn't notice, there's on the bottom of the inside page, so this is the outside page, on the inside, there's a little healing ministries section. And every week, I make sure that there's a couple of little neat, clever sayings there to help us start. And I did not plan this way, but this week says, we, like trees, are known by our fruit. Okay, and we're going to be talking about fruit of the Spirit. So I didn't plan it that way, but I'll pay Becky $20 for putting it in the bulletin for us. But if you will, over time, just look at those and cut those out. And that's designed for us to just remind ourselves in this day and time of what is going on upside down. Also, in the track outside, you'll see a little brochure on fruit of the Spirit done by Alan Webster and Luke Griffin, the House to House. And they've done a great job at putting that together. And you'll notice that fruit, for those that are here up front, is not one. It's kind of a piece of fruit. But anyway, it's got the Greek. It's got all the listing of the fruit of the Spirit, but it also has some scriptures that go along with it. So take that and put that in your Bible, because that's something that's always good to have. And so as we continue in our study, if you remember, we started out with Jesus talking about the Beatitudes. And those Beatitudes, we've been breaking apart and looking at how those go, but those were some astonishing, some amazing words that he made, but we're supposed to be the salt and the light. And then as you see, the rest of his Sermon on the Mount is there on the left, is the different ways that he was showing you need to follow me and God against different things. We looked at what is coming from your heart. Do you want to be the one on the left, or do you want to be the one on the right? Of course, our answer is the one on the right, but as we talked about last week, the spirit and the flesh are always pulling each other. And even Paul says, the things that I want to do, I don't do, but I do the things that I don't want to do. And so that's a reminder of things that exile and make the defilement of the heart. Then we looked at the qualities of love in 1 Corinthians 13, of what love isn't and what love is. And it continues to focus in on us and what we do with it. And then last week we went through the spirit and the flesh and what needs to win. And even our speaker on Wednesday night was talking about that. And I was punching Pamela. I'm like, hey, he read my lesson. He didn't, but he had a great lesson, Matt Amos from Woodstock. So if you haven't seen that one, go back and look at it. It was an excellent study. So in your pages that you have there, or your lessons, we're going to go to that first page, and we're going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit and the unity of the Spirit. And I'm putting these both together. And I'm not going to spend a lot of depth in it because we're spending all this year on the fruit of the Spirit, but I'm going to tie it together and how it goes. And these are, again, addressing what Jesus brought, that our relationship with us to God, us to humanity, and then what is our true way to the kingdom. And so these are going to, again, bring into focus. And if you remember last week, Paul's writing this, how many years? Give or take 30 years after Jesus made the Sermon on the Mount. And if we talked about that. If we were to try to remember something we did 30 years ago, can you remember? Barely. Or we take it and we embellish it. If it's good, if it's bad, what do? Well, and so if we were to write something together from 30 years ago, it wouldn't be cohesive. And in this case, Paul is doing that. So we're going to talk about that. And so go to your next page, and we're going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit. It is singular. And singular meaning that it's not fruits. It's a unity of qualities that we're talking about. It's Christ-likeness, a life for God, and one produces all but not partial. You can't just choose which ones you want. For example, I don't like pears that much, but if I'm supposed to eat pears, guess what? I'm going to have to eat pears. I like apples, but some apples I don't like. I like the green ones and different things. My point is, you can't choose which ones. And what Paul is talking about here is the fruit of the Spirit. And singular is it. Now, one side note, I used to work for a company called Singular. It was Bell South Mobility who turned to singular with a C, and we thought that was the weirdest name, but it worked out. And if you remember, there's a little jack. That's just a side note. But anyway, it's singular. The Spirit is also born of the Spirit. And so without the Spirit, we cannot bear fruit. And how do we receive the Spirit? We receive the Spirit as a gift at baptism. And that Spirit helps us through life, but we've got to be able to do our own things, but that Spirit's working with us, but we cannot bear the fruit if we don't have it. So if we decide not to walk in the light, guess what's not with us? We're not covered, but we can always be covered by the blood of Jesus when we correct ourselves. Fruit comes by walking in, led by, and living in the Spirit. And so those are action words. Those aren't nouns, they're action. We need to be walking, we need to be led by, and we need to be living in the Spirit. And then next is the fruit of the Spirit is aid of the Spirit. And we received it as baptism, as we just talked about. And we'll go to a few scriptures here. We know what John, Acts, and Titus talk about the received at baptism, but Romans 8 and 5. And again, Romans 8 is a great chapter. Just really digest that, look into it, because it's life in the Spirit, and Paul's talking through that. But setting our minds, Romans 8 and 5. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on things of the Spirit. That's one thing that Paul is talking about that we talked about last week, that there's aid with the Spirit. We've got to set our minds on that. If you go to Ephesians 6, again, this is Paul yet again talking to him. We're going to be in Ephesians back and forth. But in Ephesians 6 and 17, right after the armor of God, and he talks about, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And so where have you got to put that Spirit? You got to put it in the heart. And as Matt Amos said, that's where our mind is. And then back to Romans 8, 12 through 13. Okay, I put my mind on it. I've got the Bible. I tote my Bible around, but you got to pray. And prayer is a valuable tool. And what does prayer do? It humbles you when you ask it the right way. Now, if I want a new shiny red car, am I going to get a shiny red car tomorrow? Maybe. Maybe it's a Hot Wheel someone's going to buy for me and say, okay, there's your thing, But no, I can't ask for that. I got to be humble and ask for that. We know that Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, how humble was he in his prayers? His human side said, I don't want to do it, but he said, I'm going to follow what your will is and that the Spirit, and he could have decided to do that. So the fruit of the Spirit is singular, is born of the Spirit, and is an aid of the Spirit. And so before we get into the list, your next page, flipping over, is I'm going to go into some of the meanings of it. And I know Kyle and his lessons are doing a great job at explaining the different fruit of the Spirit. I think we start out a new series this week on patience. I got every red light on the way over here, so I told my wife, I said, yep, I'm getting taught patience. And she gets all the green lights. And we know the old saying, don't ask for patience, because what's going to happen? You're going to get something that's going to cause you to be patient. But anyway, he'll be describing that. But if you look at it, the kingdom citizens shows evidence of inward walk and outward fruit. It's got to start where? Got to start inside. Okay, we love to point, and I've used that analogy before, but we love to point, but it's got to start here so that we are walking, and then the outwardness is showing. And so what does that do? In Galatians 5 and 22, we'll go there. And we'll be jumping around a little bit, but Galatians 5:22, it includes things that are from God. And I wanted to break these down into these categories for us to really understand. In verse 22a, it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, and peace. Okay, where does that come from? God. And where can we find that? Look in your Bible. Why did he need so many pages to tell us that? Because we're stubborn. And we don't want to say that doesn't happen to us. But in the end, where was he the whole time? He loved us, joy, and peace. And that's the source is coming from God. If you can start there, that's where it begins. Where do we try to find love, joy, and peace? In pizza, in sports, quietness. Are we really finding love, joy, and peace? No. It's temporary. And this is what this is. And this is, at the bottom, I called it an infused life. Now, I've had some of those olive oil things that are infused with this and that and whatever, but in the basis of it is what? Olive oil. It might have been put in. Well, our life needs to be God, and then these things infused into our lives. Love, joy, and peace. It's got to start from within, and we talked about that last week, the spirit and the flesh. But it's got to be inclusive, and that's a word in today's world. It's different, but we have to include all these things in our life, and it's God that it is. The next thing on your page there, it incorporates verse 22 and B, the section B. It incorporates, if you have love, joy, and peace infused in your life, then patience, kindness, and goodness are your actions to others. And you first got to love who? Yourself, so that you can love others. It's not that you are so, look at me and love myself. No, you've got to love, joy, and peace where you've got to be. You've got to be at peace with who you are and what you are with God, and then let me show it to others. And that's what it is. Some versions say long suffering. I had some long suffering in my life, and there's still some long suffering to go. That's another word for patience. Kindness and goodness. Action equals loves the others, and it's a developing life. And did we learn patience right out of the womb? No. I have a 1-year-old granddaughter, and she lets us know when she's not patient because she's now hungry. Now she does this more, or she points, but she's lets us know, okay, now I'm not going to be patient anymore. I'm ready. She's a great kid. Don't get me wrong. Weren't we all the same thing? We were all salespeople, right? If we didn't get what we wanted, what did we do? Starting out from a little one, wham, we got attention, and then we found out, I'm going to not be patient. My point is, we've got to incorporate these things, but based it on the love, joy, and peace. And that's a developing life. That's the inwardness first. We've got to start with us. And then finally, the last half of Galatians 22 and then verse 23, it says that with faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, against such things are no law. And so we've got to integrate this. Okay, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, great. But I also have to now incorporate that and then integrate it into our lives like a guardrail, like this aisle right here. I've got to make sure that I'm faithful, gentle, and self-controlled in my actions. We've all been guilty of saying, well, if you don't do this, this is going to happen, which is right, but we can do that with gentleness and self-control. And that's what Paul is talking about here. He's talking to us today. And if you remember, Galatians, they knew better. And they knew that they were supposed to be following Jesus. They knew they were supposed to be doing things, and they decided to do it anyway against that. That's when I got in the most trouble, either by my school teachers, by my parents, by whatever. When you knew better and you still did it, that was when it really got interesting. That's what I'm going to say, interesting. And then I learned long-suffering. And then I learned kindness and joy and love and peace. But we need to use it as a guide and then exuding our life. We don't use that word a lot, exuding, but it's the outward fruit. So the fruit of the Spirit meaning is deep. And so if you take that that brochure, I'll find it here in a minute, where to put it. If you find, this back there, you'll see the Greek word. I encourage you to go to the concordance and read that Greek word and really understand it. Because Paul's writing in this, he's inspired, of course, but that Greek word has a deeper meaning than our English words. So, make sure you go and look at that. So, the next page that you have is the fruit of the Spirit is inward. As we just read, walk in the Spirit, infused life in God, developed in life of love, and then your conduct, and then Christ-like. Which one did you have more challenges with when you were in school? Was it your grades or was your conduct grade? Both of them were important, but which one which one were you supposed to be really focusing on? Your conduct, right? Yeah, your grades are important. I can help you with that, but you can control what? Your conduct. And I know our families, and your families probably too, when you walked out the door, what name were you representing? First of all, your own name, right? You're representing the Newmans, or so-and-sos, Johnsons, or whatever, and then you're representing Christ. And that was so important. That conduct was important. So it's got to be inward. The fruit of the Spirit is inward. It's got to start there. And then, as we talked about last week, I used the same graphic here, is that soul, the heart, is where? Here. And so you've got to feed it so that then you can have things that are outward. And if you look there on your page, you've got the unlock these things. What are we good at? Sometimes we're saying we're a Christian, right? And we stick it right here, and then what do? We just keep it. Well, yeah, I'm a Christian, but you're not doing anything with it. Paul's talking that we got to have fruit of the Spirit. We got to be outward. We got to unlock what those things that we read in Galatians: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And guess what? Have you ever gotten in trouble for doing any of those? No, there's no law against it. Galatians 5:23, and that's why I want you to really understand when he's talking about this. He's talking about to us today, of course, but in Galatians, he's really trying to get them to move forward. And he gave them a punch right at the very beginning of that letter to them. He really punched them. And sometimes we need that, don't we? We need a punch in the face, or we need something that happens in our lives to shock and awe us, and then we realize what's going on. And that's what's happening here, is that we've got to inwardly put it into our soul, into our minds, and then outwardly we do it. We know this. It's something that is not new to us, but I was putting it together so that we can, talk through how does that now resonate with what Jesus was saying in the Beatitudes. And so get your pens out and keep your fingers there in Galatians 5:22 and 23, and we're going to fill in the circle. And so if you remember, at the core of this circle, and this is my brain putting it together, y'all can come up with your own graphic or whatever, but at the middle of this was Jesus, the purple. Citizens, he said, this is what you got to be. And if you remember, the first ring around that was the first part of the Beatitudes. That's where he's saying, be poor in spirit, those who mourn, and it's the purple. It might be hard to see up there, but on your sheet you can see those who mourn, the gentle, the self-control, those that forgive are merciful, pure in heart, honesty and kind, peacemakers, and persecuted for righteousness' sake. That's some, as we remember, that was a strange sermon. But that inner ring is what Jesus was saying, this is who you need to be if you're going to be me, Christ-like. The outer ring, the second outer ring is the red section. That's what we talked about in 1 Corinthians 13, the qualities of love. Love does not envy, love is patient, love does not boast or anger, love bears, believes, hopes, and endures, love is kind, keeps no record, love is not rude, rejoices in truth, love is not self-seeking, and love never ends. And as you can see, I put that surrounding what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount as our Beatitudes, as we call them. Now we're going to fill it in. So your top right-hand section up there, Galatians 5:22g. Now, I did this. I took the liberty to kind of take Paul's words and put it together, but if you look, the word is faithfulness. The faithfulness is the blue, top right hand corner. And if you're pure in heart and humble and love does not envy, faithfulness. And so that's where that's going. It lines up with what Jesus was saying. You got to start out with what? You got to start out with faith. Believe in me. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks with Peter. You add to your faith, boom, 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 boom. So the first one is faithfulness. Is what, and this is Paul writing what, 30-something years after this sermon. We don't know if Paul was there at the Sermon on the Mount or not, but we know he was inspired here to write, and he is telling us, be like Christ and show the fruit. Your next one, there in the middle of verse 22, is goodness. Those who mourn. Love is patient and goodness. So that's the word you need to write in there. And there's a Greek word that's a lot deeper than goodness, but that's our English word that does it. But those who mourn basically are saying what? I can't do and live life without Christ. So if I've got Christ, I need to be doing good. If I'm not doing good, what am I doing? Bad. And so this is the goodness that he's talking about. Your next one, right here, is gentleness. In 52, the first one in verse 23 is gentleness. And what did Jesus say? Blessed are those that are meek, are gentle. Paul said, love does not boast or anger. It's gentle. And then Paul, again, is saying in Galatians, gentleness. And that's a powerful word, to be gentle. And if you, and Paul's talking to the Galatians, he's giving them a punch, but he's also being gentle in the way that he's trying to encourage them. We can all really take someone down and cut them down at the knees, that we would say, right? We can still do the same thing, but in a gentle way. And that's what's occurring here. The next one, self-control. There in the part B of verse 23, self-control. And Jesus said, blessed are those who are righteous and thirst and hunger. That's self-control. I have to self-control. Last night, some of us went to Dominic's Italian restaurant. Have you ever been there? The plates are full of food. I had to have self-control not to do what? Keep doing it. And then we were able to go to someone's home and they had tiramisu. I love tiramisu. How much of that did I want to eat? All of it. I had to have self-control. Now I'm using that as a hunger, but it's the same thing, that love bears, believes, hopes, and endures. And we sing a song about that. It's self-control. And Paul is a great example of what? Self-control. And he talks about it. And so he's writing about that to the Galatians. He's writing about that today in 2025. The next one that we'll start studying more on this month is patience. Love, joy, peace, and then right after love, joy, peace is patience. And that's interesting that he puts it that way. But he's referring to when Jesus said, the merciful that are forgiving, love is kind and keeps no record, and patience. How many of us are patient in here? Okay, I didn't see anybody raise their hands really high. Why not? Don't answer that question, right? But we need to be patient. And as we have got older, we learn what about patience? It's important, right? And we would say we bite our what? We bite our tongue. You can think it, but don't say it. Be patient. And then let someone, or let yourself go through a situation. And I'm not good at that either. I won't think, I'm a plug and play person, so if you want me to read a manual, forget it. But sometimes my patient runs out, and if I had read the manual, what would have happened? My patient, I've been fine, but I like to plug and play and do it and try it out. But anyway, so Jesus is saying, the merciful, forgive. If you're forgiving, you're what? You're patient. And how many times did he say? Peter said, hey, I don't want to forgive these people anymore. What did Jesus say? 70 times 7. Now, he wasn't saying that that's the exact number, but he was trying to give them that you got to be patient. And how patient was Jesus with us? Woo, very patient. Your next one, right after patience, is kindness. And Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, who are honest and kind. Love is not rude and rejoices truth, is what Paul talked about. And here he's saying kindness. And again, I encourage you to go look at the Greek word. It's got a lot more depth into it. But kindness is an English word. And we say, oh, that's such a kind person. You know, and that's a fruit. And that's what we have to continue with. The next one, next to last, in Ephesians 22c is peace. Peacemakers. Love is not self-seeking, and peace. Right now, this world is not at what? Peace. If we could use all the negative energy to be positive, what kind of place would this be? Peaceful. And I was talking to Jim Kraft at dinner last night, and we reminded each other that God sent Jesus when the world was not what? Peaceful. And what happened? It was turned upside down for God. And we can still do that. Even though we're being influenced by other outside activities or news, we can still be what? Peacemakers. And where are we going to get our peace ultimately? In heaven. Okay? You won't have to wake up in the middle of the night. You can rest peacefully, and God says what? There's no pain, there's no sorrow, there's no darkness, it's light. And that's what we're working to, but Jesus is saying, be peacemakers. And that's an action word, folks. That means you have to do something. You can't just be peaceful, you also have to be peacemakers. And that's what Jesus is talking about. And he had a great way of doing it, didn't he? My dad's mother, Big Mama was her name. She was probably, about 6 feet, give or take. She was a big lady. She could make peace, and you'd be getting in trouble, and you'd feel happy about it. And you're like, how did that happen? She knew how to make peace in a way. She was a big lady, too, so that helped when I was a little kid. I'm like, okay, I can't take this down. But anyway, peacemakers, and we've all been through that. She had a good way of doing that. My father did, too. Galatians 22, A and B, I put together. I know there's 9 in Paul's list of the fruit of the Spirit. Well, I made 8 so that I could, 7, 8, made it fit into this. But Jesus said, those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake, in other words, you love me so much that you're willing to be persecuted for my sake. Paul talks about that love never ends in Corinthians, and here he's saying that love enjoys. So, you should have this wheel filled out. I hope it resonates with you. We're going to add a couple more layers in the next couple of weeks as we go along. And this is something you might not know, but I had Himanshu Pandit was a co-worker of mine at AT&T at the time. And he came to me one day and said, you're a Christian, right? I said, yes, I am. He didn't know what I was or how, whatever. And he said, I could just tell by you, and I'm not praising myself, but in the world I was living in, he said, I could just tell you are living it. And so that was a validation. And then he came back the next day and said, can you tell me about the character of Christ? Ooh, that was a hard question. And so what I did is I built this wheel, so you're getting the benefit of Himanshu Pandit, I was trying to explain to him the character of Jesus. And so I went in and I dove into this, and this helped him realize, and he was that close to becoming a Christian, and then he had to go back to India for his mother's heart surgery, and then COVID happened. And he got stuck over there. But we stay in touch here and there, and he'll talk about this. I'm hoping one day his heart will be pricked. But when he asked me that question, tell me the character of Jesus, how would you answer that question? Whoa, well, he was a nice guy. He was a carpenter. You don't know. What is the true character of Jesus? And so you're getting some of that benefit from that. So thank you for humoring me in my wheel diagram, but this has also helped me understand how could I explain it on paper. And so this is what it is, and we're going to get a couple more circles around this, and hopefully you'll get to use this. Maybe I'll talk to, who is it? Alan Webster and Luke Griffin. Maybe I can get me a brochure with the little circles on it. But anyway, that's not what it's about. I'm supposed to be not prideful, right? All right, so I'm going to now move into, okay, that's the fruit of the Spirit. You're like, okay, great, Todd. We've studied that a million times, which is important. We need to always continue to remind ourselves of it because we get out of balance, just like that wheel on your car. And that's one reason I came up with this wheel, is like when that wheel gets out of balance, you got to find out where it's out of balance, fix it so that it runs smoothly. Same thing here. But now we got to have unity. And that's something that the devil wants us to not have, right? He wants us to have just enough unity to say we're Christians, but I'm going to do it my way. And this isn't Frank Sinatra, that song. I'll do it my way. No, we're going to do it Christ's way. And Paul's talking about unity. And unity is so important because if we don't have it, then everything else that we just studied on the fruit of the Spirit and whatever, Paul says is what? A loud, clanging what? Cymbal, bang, bell, whatever. You're just a loud, noisy person. You got to have unity. And the devil tried to cut into that unity many times, and is still trying to do that today, right here in Buford and other places of the body. The devil knows he can't kill the what? He can't kill the church. Because Jesus said what? The gates of Hades can't even touch it. But what can the devil do? Satan can go after who? Each one of us. Pick us apart. One by one by one by one. And then break that unity. And then he's like, good, I've got Buford all messed up and turned in, going this way and that way. I'm going to move on because they're not unified. And we've had some bumps in the roads, and we've worked real hard to keep that unity. And that's what's so important about this. And that's what Paul is going to talk about in Ephesians. We're going to go there in just a minute. But if you look on your page, a kingdom citizen must walk in unity. And that's that verb again. We must walk. Guess what? We are worthy of the calling. So Ephesians 4:1 talks about that we must walk because we are called to walk in the Spirit. How did we get that calling? Because we made a decision to follow Jesus, and when we followed Jesus, boom, we got a big stamp on us and said, you're worthy to walk in my ways. And that's what he's talking about here. The glory of Christ. 2 Thessalonians 2:13 through 14. Let's go there. Because we're going to come back to Ephesians in a minute. I'm not skipping it on purpose. But 2 Thessalonians 2:13 through 14. And Thessalonians is great. It's trying to encourage the Christians in Thessalonica and beyond, and us in Buford on 2025. But verses 13, 14. But we ought always to give thanks to God for you, brethren, beloved by the Lord, because God chose you as the first fruits to be saved through sanctification by the Spirit and belief in the truth. To this he called you through our gospel so that you may obtain the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ. You may obtain the glory. All right, we're worthy, we're glory. And then in 1 Thessalonians verse 12, in that same opening, 1 Thessalonians 2 and 12, it talks about that we exhorted each one of you and encouraged you and charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. And there's that word again, the conduct. Our conduct grade. And that's important. We can say all day long that we're Christians and that this is it, but they're going to watch our what? Our conduct. And even Paul said that even if you stand and you get persecuted and you get laughed and made fun of, make sure that they know you were doing it for what? For Christ. So that they know, okay, he's convicted. He's willing to take all this ridicule for Christ. It's just conduct, and we're worthy to be able to do that. And thank God that he sent Jesus so that we can say that we're worthy to do that. The next part on that page in front of you is Christ-like qualities. We have to walk with, in Ephesians 4, it talks about all lowliness, gentleness, long-suffering, and bearing one another in love. And that doesn't mean we need to walk around with our heads down and like, oh, poor pitiful me. No, it's saying that we are not worthy to get to heaven without Jesus because we're sinful people. And we need to walk with long-suffering but bearing one another in love. How many of us have problems in our life? All of us. How many need each other to help? All of us. Did you know it takes 6 to 8 people to carry you to the grave as the pallbearers? Wonder if we took 6 to 8 people now and help us through life. Just think about that. But we're not willing sometimes to share our long-suffering and bearing because that's weakness. I'd rather have the 6 to 8 people now helping me carry me instead of when that day comes. Help me now. And then you can help me later too. But called to follow Christ. And then the next one is with diligence. Walk endeavoring to keep unity in the body of peace and to make peace. And again, we talked about that in our wheel just a minute ago. So the unity of the Spirit has something to do with our walk. You came in here today for a reason. I don't think you came to hear me, but you came to say, I need to study the Word, and you walked here. You physically walked. It might have been harder for some of us than others, but we made it, didn't we? We walked, and I want to do something. That shows that you said, I want to do it. You're encouraging me by being here because I have someone to be able to share this with, maybe online too. But walking is important, and the unity is important. When you see unity like this, it's so important. The next page is our duty. What's our duty? And this is important for the fruit of the Spirit, and I'll tie it in here in a minute, but is to obtain the Spirit. We attain the Spirit through God, the Godhead, through Christ's body on the cross, Ephesians 2:16, through our hope and his resurrection. Peter talks about that. The faith that revealed, Jude talks about that. That's the brother of Christ that finally said, you know what? He's real. And in the baptism that we're commanded in, we obtain that Spirit. So if we got that Spirit, then it's our duty to do something with it. The next one is to maintain it. We need to walk in Ephesians 4:1-3, and you keep hearing the word walk here, which is very important. I, therefore, prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Eager. So we need to walk it. He talks in 1 Corinthians, we need to talk it. It's a way that we say things. And then you've heard the saying what? Walk the talk. That's what this is. Okay, you can walk it, you can talk it, but can you do both? And we should be doing it. We talked about that at the very beginning of this class. Character, personality. Sometimes we want our personality to be bigger than our what? Our character. Our character should be the same as personality all the way through, just like Jesus. So we need to walk the talk. And that's what Jude also talks about in Jude 3. In the minutes I have left, we'll continue, but Philippians 1:27, if you go there, Philippians is yet again Paul talking to this, and you can see his theme here. He's trying to get people to understand what it's really like, and Philippians says, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. Okay, that's Paul yet again, and why is Paul writing all these things? Of course, he's inspired. But boy, he had to make a change in life, didn't he? Saul to Paul. And then he had to go teach people that he was not comfortable with, Gentiles. He was the Jew of Jews, the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Sadducees. And now he got it. And that's what he's talking about. Remain faithful in the unity. And he says, if I come and see it, yay. If I come to Buford, I hope I see unity. But if I hear about Buford, I hope that you're doing that. Is that the first or second bell? All right, so let's keep going. We'll finish it up. Your next page is the unity of the Spirit. You got a little graphic there. I'm keeping these graphics very simple. I can come up with some fancy pictures, but I thought these were simple. And there's 7 ones here. We know that in Ephesians 4:4-6. It's right there on the screen. You got one body, one Spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Is there anything missing there? No. What's he saying? We've got to be unified, and then the fruit of the Spirit will be what? Oh, wow, those people are real. It's just not fake. It's not I don't know what they call it today. Where do they grow the fruit that is in these glow houses? And if you ever eaten one, it's not very tasteful, is it? But if you eat one that's been grown on a tree, oh, now that tastes really good. Which fruit are you going to be? One that looks like it, and I love Granny Smith apples, but I won't buy the ones that have been grown in the organic places because they just don't have a lot of taste. Anyway, we need to be one, and we need to show it. So your last page, the fruit of the Spirit and the unity of the Spirit is an inward life that abides in the Spirit. The unity is a shared life. So right now we're sharing that as a unified group, and we walk through the Spirit. And then finally, as I close, it's an outward life that when we walk out of here, that people know that we're Christians. And I don't have to wear a T-shirt that says it, or I don't have to wear a ball cap that says I'm a Christian. They need to see it. So as we close, make sure that you apply some of these in your life. If there's some that are out of balance, go back and look at that wheel. All right, I got to work on this one. But it starts at the very beginning, up the top of that wheel. Next week, we'll be talking about our apparel and our aroma for Christ. So stay tuned. Have a great rest of the day.